One, we are now live. I'll go ahead and actually let's just do me for a minute. um, Welcome to another painting of another Marvel United character. So last time, if you were on last time, we actually had a vote to see who would who we would paint next. Sorry, I was making sure the audio was working on the other screen. And everybody's vote was the Wasp. It was pretty unanimous, and I'll tell you what, it was rough. And the Wasp is just such a detailed character. So looking here, there are just so many individual little lines going on that it was difficult. And not only, a lot of times when you put down the base coat to cover the majority of the body, you'll get a lot of paint on those little marks, and I did over and over again. The real issue with the Wasp is covering those up with yellow, because yellow does not cover well at all. So we're going to play through this. I'll talk you through some of my process. If you have questions, comments, I'm feeling a little bit low on energy today, so please comment. Let's talk about stuff. And I have some fun, not trivia necessarily, but some fun facts about the Wasp as a Marvel character according to the comics, and some really fascinating things that I found out that I wasn't aware of going into this. So let's go ahead. So this paint that I'm using on the Wasp as a base for her suit is Necromancer's Cloak from the Army Painter. Now, in a lot of the images, it came off as like a little bit blue, but I didn't want that. I did want it to be something other than black. I wanted it to have a little bit of a sheen that, I don't know, just had a little bit more personality. However, I did not want it to have a little bit of blue in there because, I mean, she's a wasp. Wasps are black and yellow, right? So the base coat honestly took me forever to get finished. So I cut out a lot of footage here. This is hands down to date my longest paint job, especially of these Marvel characters. Just all of the little cracks and crevices. I did prime this in white, so I used the Army Painter white, matte white primer, and I did that because of the amount of yellow. Because of all of the yellow, I was worried that we would have a hard time getting a good, vibrant color if we didn't prime white. You can see what I'm doing, and what I did in a lot of these places is I would go on pretty thick with the brush, and then I'd brush it away with my thumb in order to get it off of those higher points. It's something that people pretty commonly do, so you'll notice I do apply liberally, then rub it off with my thumb a lot. Now, what I'm getting here is silver for her, what do you even call those? Antenna? Her communication devices. And I wanted those to be a bright, shining silver. I originally painted under her jawline with the Necromancer Cloak black. But then looking back at the reference images, I did realize that she has that bright silver going all the way around her jawline. A fun fact about, while I'm doing this, fun fact about the Wasp, she was one of the founding members of the Avengers, and original scripts from, I believe Josh Whedon, I get their names so confused, had the Wasp as a very prominent character. He basically had two scripts written, one that had Wasp as kind of a main female lead, and the other that had Black Widow. Once they got Scarlett Johansson for Black Widow, which is what they were hoping for, they went with the script that didn't have the Wasp in there. So kind of fascinating. If you look from a comic perspective, if you're aware of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you're watching this, you probably are. So all that we've seen of the Wasp is Hope Pym, and and Hope is actually the daughter of the original Wasp, which they do talk about. Hope actually in the comics never assumes the Wasp identity. Hope is actually a villain. I wrote down the name because, yeah, the Red Queen. So Hope actually, when they reform the Avengers, and which is the Avengers kind of as we know it with Hawkeye, Iron Man, all of those, Hope is actually really offended that she wasn't kind of a major deciding factor in that, since her parents, Janet and Hank, were part of the original Avengers. So she actually goes super villain on everyone and is the Red Queen. So the Hope that we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe thus far is actually pretty inaccurate. Because the Wasp, Hope was never the Wasp. It was just Janet. So pretty fascinating. She's actually one of the few Marvel characters that never actually assumes an alternate identity or a secret identity. She is always just the Wasp, Janet Pym, and I guess Janet Van Dyne before she marries Hank. And reading through the history of the Wasp, it's pretty messed up. Like, really, I mean, we all know that Marvel characters go through their pretty bizarre twists and turns, but man, Janet Pym, if they ever were to do a throwback and do some of like the Wasp's backstory, I would be pretty fascinated to see some of that, because I mean, at one point, Hank kind of goes insane and develops multiple personalities because of something that got injected into his bloodstream. And she actually, while he's in this state, she tricks him into marrying her. She had her consciousness transferred into basically a cyborg and became Ultron's love interest at one point. Like, her past is completely bonkers. So anyway, back to the painting. That's enough about the Wasp. With the painting, this is Demonic Yellow. It's from the Army Painter. I use this for all of the scribe lines, the details, all of these like raised areas. It was tricky. So I cut out, when I clocked the footage that I had recorded for this, it was around 3 hours. So I did cut out a ton in here because it just took a lot of, and I also painted a lot, not on camera, because I knew that I just had to do multiple coats of yellow, very thin, across all of this. So what you're seeing here is an extremely sped up version. Most of this is sped up to around 400%. And I also cut pretty large pieces out of it so that we're not here all day, because I got to get back to work at some point. So I used this Elven Flesh color from the Army Painter for her skin, and I hated it. So there may be a use for this Elven Flesh color somewhere. It was not here. It just looked so orange and saturated, kind of like a really bad spray tan. Like she just did not get a good foundation. So I finish out with this because I wanted it to be a clean layer. However, as soon as I started putting it on, I knew that I was going to be swapping that out for another color. So basically what I did for that color is I mixed in a little bit of white with that Elven Flesh tone, and it brought it up to actually a really nice place. Right here, what I'm doing is I'm really just applying a really watered down coat to make sure it smooths out all of those areas. And then this is the lightened version. So hopefully you agree with me that it's a lot better. On this video, I think under these lights, it actually looks a little bit more pale than it actually looks. And at the end of this, we'll go back to the beginning and look at the finished piece. And maybe I did take it a little bit too light. Like I said, I think it looks lighter here in the video than it does in real life. But I definitely think it looks a lot more natural, just that less saturated color than what we had originally. let's see, the wings. The wings were by far the most fun to do on this one. They just had such clear boundaries. You didn't have to worry a lot about whether you're getting it in the right areas. I used Void Shield Blue from the Army Painter for this base wing color. And I've looked at other paint jobs of the Wasp online, and a lot of them got pretty crazy with different color gradients and stuff like that. I did a significant amount of wet blending on these to get a gradient in there, but I did just want it to be only Void Shield Blue going to white because they are supposed to be transparent, and really I just didn't want them to be distracting. They're already a vastly different color than the rest of her suit. So that's why I went with Void Shield Blue. And what you'll see, so when you wet blend, basically you want to work very quickly because acrylics, which all of these are acrylic based, acrylics dry very quickly. And so what you need to do is you kind of need to put on a liberal and a very watered down coat. This first base coat is really just to establish the color. I'm not wet blending yet. However, once you start wet blending, which we will here in just a second, what you want to do is you want to apply a decent amount of your one end of your gradient spectrum. So you can see here, I'm just getting like that Void Shield Blue, like really solid in there with a couple coats. And then what I'll do is at the tip of the wing, I'll go ahead and put in some white. And then while that's still wet, I'll actually get some more Void Shield Blue and kind of push those into each other and hopefully create in the middle kind of a blend of the two. So that's wet blending. It's not super stressful, especially when you're working on areas like this that are so simple. But what you want to do is get the two wet paints and then just kind of work them into each other in the middle ground. So you can see right here, I'm putting down a really, really light, a very light layer of white. And I pretty quickly realized that it's way too light and that I need to go a lot more pure white on this. But at this point, that Void Shield Blue is priced a little bit wet, so it's actually blending into a pretty nice gradient. You can see here's another layer of white, and I went too far down there on the wing tip, or on the wing, so I'm actually going to come back in with Void Shield Blue while this white is still wet and kind of pull it up into that area. So you can see right there, I grabbed the Void Shield Blue and I'm kind of working them together into that middle portion. I probably could have gone even a little bit more white toward the wingtip ends. The blending, the Void Shield Blue kind of took over the blending in a lot of places, but I am pretty happy with where it ended up. So while I finish up these wings, in personal news, I'm working on doing a triathlon. It's something I've always wanted to do. I'm a strong swimmer, but I hate running so much. It's the worst. And so I went running for the first time in a while yesterday, ran 2.6 miles, and my calves, I mean, after sitting here at my desk a little while too, my calves are killing me. Like, I can barely walk up and down my stairs. I need to do some stretching. So I'm sitting here flexing my calves, thinking about how much they hurt. Okay, so you can see I'm still going in with some more white. I keep having the same thought, like, yes, I want it to be like very white at the tips. I want to have like a really very clear gradient from that Void Shield Blue, where presumably the energy is coming out of her suit, right? Other fun fact, in the comics, she has PIM particles injected into her bloodstream. It's not actually a suit, which she obviously has a suit, but it's not the suit that actually gives her her abilities. It's in her bloodstream. Excuse me. And so overall, I am happy with how the Wasp turned out in this paint job. Do I want to do it again? No. This was by far the most complicated of the Marvel United characters I've done. If somebody knows of a more complicated one that I need to track down and do, please let me know. But this one was significantly harder than the others. Just the level of detail and all of that. I got through like her as a character And I was just looking at like the dye that she's kind of attached to, as well as the ground plane. And I was like, man, it's been so much already. So I actually, one thing that I went back and forth on was kind of like highlights on her suit and stuff. And I normally I would get a lighter version of this necromancer cloak, or like the black that I used on her suit, and kind of do some highlights on the top of her head and stuff. I actually didn't on this one. I used, for the yellow portions, I used a paint color called Moondust that's really kind of pale and lighter yellow. And that was in an effort to capture some of that highlight. But her suit, I kind of liked the idea of this like matte, not very reflective, just kind of blends in kind of a thing, because I end up putting some decent highlights on her goggles and her wings. I just wanted the attention to be in those areas, not necessarily on the uninteresting black of her suit. So right there, I'm applying a wash to some of the deeper areas of her suit. And the wash, I was trying to be really careful with. Right here, I put a little bit too much and had to pull it off with just a wet brush off of that breast area. But yeah, here comes the moon dust. But when I applied the wash, normally a wash, you'll just kind of do everywhere pretty liberally. But yellow's such a sensitive color and it dulls really easily with a wash. So when I went in with the wash, I just did it very specifically in areas that I knew I wanted to have those dark creases and that real definition. There's one area on her back that you can see right there that has like a nice detail line that the paint kept kind of covering up. So I went in there with a wash really delicately at the very end. I don't even think I got that part on camera. But I went in and just defined some of the lines with the wash. I had normally done washes just the entire body, but I watched a video one time where they just went in to areas that they knew they wanted to have that dark crease, and it worked really well. I was, especially with this one, where you have so many areas that you actually don't want the wash to hit. You may feel differently, but the Wasp as a character to me seems like very clean, not like the dirty, grungy type. Pretty dainty and small. So I wanted to keep her look like pretty clean, whereas most I'm pretty okay with just kind of making them look grungy and dirty because they've been in battle. But her, I wanted to keep like pretty clean. So this is a really watered down lava orange layer that I'm doing over her visor. The visor was tricky. It's clearly like meant to be transparent, but since it's not, I kind of went for almost like a pit viper, like orange. I don't know, you'll see, just kind of a chromed out look almost. And it was difficult to do. I end up pushing this watered down lava orange up over the entire glasses, then coming back in, or the visor, then coming back in with that pure yellow to give some more of those highlights. At one point I go in with pretty much a white and I do like kind of streaks over her visor to get those glares. And while I liked that, it was a little bit too strong. So you'll see I kind of go in and tone those down with streaks of more yellow and a little bit more of that watered down lava orange. So yeah, so this I believe is some of that moon dust. I may have even mixed in a little bit of white, matte white paint into it. And you can see I just run the brush, just kind of like almost chop it onto that visor to get kind of like a clear line. And for the most part, I didn't love what that did to the look. So I did change that a decent amount. Here I went in with just solid matte white and got along that top edge a little bit, just grabbed some highlights and then went down in a couple areas. They look a little aggressive at this point. So I grabbed some, well, I think at first I get some water and I kind of like water them out and kind of blend them a little bit. But yeah, you can see there, they're just so defined. So I get some yellow, some of that demonic yellow again, and I just go around the edges just so it's not so stark. And I actually really like the way it turned out. Those glares are meant to be like pretty random, right? They're occurring naturally from reflections. I believe I got some orange on her face, so I went back in with, that's one benefit of using a wet palette, is your paint stay wet long enough that if you've mixed a custom color, then you can come back to it, which is awesome. Around here, I believe I go in with the wash at this point, and I go right underneath the visor. Oh, apparently I'm still hitting some highlights on her suit, bringing out that yellow, making sure that yellow is really vibrant. I know it's the Friday before a Memorial Day weekend, so chat's really quiet today. I considered postponing doing this video because of that, but I finished the Wasp. I was excited, and I wanted to capitalize on that momentum. So, yeah, I think I'll take the time. Oh, I actually maybe should take my painting stuff. We're going to a family cabin. Oh, really quick. So I'm applying the wash to her face, and mostly just up under this visor. That's really where I wanted to get it. And what that does is it creates a little bit of a shadow on her cheeks. And so I do go back in, I think, with that skin tone, and I brush back in on the cheeks and stuff. Right there, so that wash doesn't take over in any sense, but I really needed that crease underneath the goggles to get that definition between the goggles and the skin. Anyway, like I was saying, my family's going up to a cabin over Memorial Day, and super excited about it, but it's one of those things that it's a cabin, and so not as much technology. It's going to be cold because it's still in the mountains a bit, and so something like this to entertain myself might be fun. So I went back and forth on whether even to do the red lips, but I decided I just had to, and I'm glad I did. It really only took me one shot. I just very carefully got like the lower lip and then went into the upper lip, and I got a tiny bit much on one side, so I did have to go back in right here with some of that skin tone and just clean it up a little bit going over that those lipstick marks. But overall, I was very happy with the lips. Okay, so we have about a fourth of the video left. Really quickly, we're satisfied with the Wasp at this point, and we're gonna do the dye and the base. The pips were pretty obnoxious to paint, actually. I thought they'd be easier than they were, but as you can see, there was a lot of stray paint going everywhere. And this was actually my first chance to try. So the Army Painter prides themselves on their pigment control, which means you can buy like one bottle of paint and then like continue on something that you have halfway done, and you're not going to notice a change in those values, that your pigment is always going to stay the same. They also have a collection of primers that they are a 100% match to their bottle. And so this is their matte white primer, and I have their matte white paint. And I was actually very impressed. This was the first time I've actually gotten to test that pigment control from the Army Painter, and painting that white paint on top of the white primer, there's literally no difference. Like right now, what you're seeing is a little difference in sheen and the reflective value of it, but really color wise, it was spot on. So I was very impressed with their 100% match, and it was very accurate. I've seen people do this dye different colors, and I really just wanted a classic white and black dye. I don't really know why. It just seems classic to me. And then this color that I'm using for the base is Dark Stone. I think I went too quickly into it, and I got a lot of that white paint that I had just put on the dye is getting pulled into it. So it looks really watered down. It is watered down, but it's also because it pulled some of that white from the dye. And The die and the base are actually different pieces, so it creates a really good crease. The problem with that is it also makes it difficult to get up to that crease without hitting the die with your base paint. So I kind of left that to the primer, and then I wasn't planning on this initially, but you'll see it when we get there. I ended up weathering the die a little bit and making it look kind of grungy and stuff. I wasn't going to do it originally, but something just wasn't feeling right about it to me. And as I looked, I thought to myself, that die is half submerged in mud or dirt or something. It's clearly not something that was just dropped there. And so I decided, story-wise or theme-wise, I really should add some dirt or grime to that die like it's been there for a long time. So I think by this point, my initial base coat is dry. I'm just making sure it goes right up to that die. And then the wash is really going to take care of what I need to. At this point, I hadn't decided to make the die kind of grungy. I'm just really getting that base coat solid on there because it took a while to dry after I watered down the paint and then mixed it with the white. Like, it just took a bit. So getting there. I go in with this ash gray and I actually dry brush right here. So I use my Army Painter dry brush and I get a decent amount of paint on there. Then I kind of brush it on a paper towel until you can see that it barely has any paint coming off. So what you can do is you can just kind of brush over the top of these rocks just pretty liberally, and it does kind of this like edge highlighting that's a little bit rough, just kind of catching those high points and creating a little bit of almost like an airbrush look. And I do go directly over the top of this with a wash, and it may seem silly because the wash then just takes all of those bright points that I just did and just kind of knocks them down so that they don't look near as bright. This is the Army Painter Strong Tone. But what it really does is it just kind of bridges the gap between that ash gray highlight and the dark stone base that I had going on. The tone does a nice job of kind of blending the two of those. And I will go back in with a little bit of that ash gray and bring out those highlights just a little bit more. But those layers do a lot for this. This is where I decided to dry brush some of the edges of the die that would normally like catch a little bit of dirt. And I was actually really happy with how it turned out. Just trying to be really random. That's why I'm kind of dabbing it with my fingers every now and then, just because I saw too much of like a brush stroke and I wanted to look more just like a natural like smudge or scratch in there. And then I was still feeling like the transition from the dye to the dirt that it's submerged in was a little weak. So I went in like pretty heavily with some of that dark stone base color and just kind of had it creeping up on the sides a little bit. And maybe I overdid it. I'd love to know your thoughts there, but I was actually really happy with how it turned out. I think it just brought it to a place of a little bit more realistic. And that's the video. So let's really quick take another look at the Wasp here. There's before and after. So I'm just going to step through this. I should probably just let it play. I don't know why I don't add one at the end that's like a really slow look, because it's hard to catch all of it there. But overall, thanks for the votes. I'm not going to call for a vote on this next one, not because that was a horrible experience, but because pretty much nobody's on here. If you do have a thought on which one I should paint next, I have Black Widow, I have Captain America, I have Captain Marvel, and I think that's it, because I think there's 6 characters in the base and I've painted 3. So there's also the villains. So if you think the villains should be who I paint next, let me know in the comments. I'm probably not going to start on this over the weekend. I have other stuff that needs to get done. But I am interested. Once I have all of these done, I'm going to seal them with a matte, probably polyurethane. No. kind of like an acrylic coat. But yeah, thanks for joining today. It was obviously a little bit quiet today as far as chat and stuff goes, but not surprising as it is Memorial Day weekend. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Be safe. Watch this video later. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm the Board Game Critic. I'm here as part of the Board Vengers. Like and subscribe if you haven't already for more videos. We super appreciate the support. Clicking that button and liking the video is really a small thing for you to do, but has honestly a big effect on our ability to make videos and make what we hope is good content. So have a good one, and we'll talk to you later.